until now, the Alter Rebbe has explained to us what is Teshuva. So in chapter 1, he explained to us, in chapter 2 and 3, he explained that basic Teshuva is forsaking the sin that you've done, making a resolution not to do it again, and to accept upon yourself God's yoke, known in Hebrew as Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shemayim. That's basic Teshuva. The other issues of Teshuva are details to enhance the mitzvah. That was the first. Then from chapter 4, 5, and 6, he explained what happens when you do a sin, when you do a transgression. You separate the last letter of God's ineffable name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton. You separate the last Hey from the three letters Yud Kei Vav. And when you make that separation, you're bringing divisiveness, division between God Almighty and yourself. I'm just, summarizing it for you. So what is the idea of Teshuva? So we learned yesterday in chapter 6, it's to tashuv, to bring back, to return. Avram, hey, Teshuva is comprised of two words, tashuv, hey. There is the idea of reconnecting the first hey, the second letter of the ineffable name, with the source, but that he hasn't spoken about yet much about. But he focused on what's relevant to us, which is the last hey. The last hey represents dibur, speech. It represents what we call malchus, kingship, which is the idea of the Jew, the soul as it is in the Jew. When the Jew commits a transgression, there's a separation between that last hey and the first three letters. And the Alter Rebbe taught us that every one of us has the name of God within ourselves. It's Chochmah, Bina, Midos, and Malchus, as he explained at length in chapter 5. Today, in chapter 7, he begins explaining how do you do Teshuva. In other words, until now, the Alter Rebbe said what Teshuva is. First, he explained what Teshuva is in halachic and Talmudic terms. Then he explained what Teshuva is in spiritual, mystical terms. And now he explains, so how do I do it? That's what we're going to learn in chapter 7. But before that, the Alter Rebbe opens up chapter 7 with the following words. Please look inside. V'ulam, page 192. V'ulam, and however, derech ha'emes v'yosher, the path of truth and righteousness and proper, l'pchinas tshuva tato hey tato now, to return the lower level of tshuva, which is to return the second hey of God's name to the full name. Hem beis dvorim derech klal. You need to do two things. And before we go to what the two things are, the Alter Rebbe says here very interesting words. Derech ha'emes v'hayosher. The true path and the righteous path. A, what does it mean? B, why two paths? So the Rebbe once explained the following idea and how it's relevant here. Emes, truth, is constant. The Mishnah says when you have to purify a person who in the times when there was ritual impurity, those laws, tum and tara, the Torah says you need mayim chayim, living water. What is living water? So the Mishnah and the Talmud explain living water is such water that comes from a stream that never ceases to flow. And Yoni, the Mishnah says, if you take water from a place that dries up only once in 7 years, you know what the Mishnah calls those waters? Mayim koizvim, false waters. Why are they false waters? They're flowing every time for 7 years, except once it dried up. The Mishnah says that's not the meaning of Chaim. Mayim Chaim, living waters. Mayim Chaim is consistent. It never stops flowing. And if it does, it's invalid for the criteria of being living waters. Emes, truth, Mark, Moshe, truth. What is truth? Constant. I don't care if you're in New Jersey, you're in LA, you're in China, you're in Eretz Yisrael, you're in Florida, or you're in Cincinnati. If it's truth, you're truthful wherever you are. You don't change. It's hard because the circumstances challenge you, right? But I can tell you, my dear students, that the only way to get the message across is when you show and you are yourself with truth. Okay? I didn't come here putting on, covering up my bald haircut, near bald haircut, and putting on a fancy tie and a fancy shirt. And like someone said to me, you wear those Brooklyn suspenders. Come on, get yourself some colorful suspenders when you go down to Cincinnati. This is Chaim Dalfin. You take it or you leave it. You don't like it? Too bad. You like it? Join the club. The idea of emes is be emes. Be truthful wherever you are. That's who you are. That's it. Now, naturally, a person should behave better, and if you go somewhere and you know that their custom is so and so within the realm of what's acceptable Jewishly to you, you accommodate. But inside you're the same. So the Alter Rebbe says the first thing you have to know is when it comes to Teshuva, when it comes to doing Teshuva, to returning to God, be truthful. Be truthful. Now, I want to make it clear, being truthful doesn't mean, well, I've lived like a rat, excuse the expression, for 25 years of my life, I'm going to continue living like a rat. No, Teshuva means change. Teshuva means make a change in your life. And if you realize that the way you lived was not healthy, was not good, and you made blunders and mistakes, and look what you have now, live up to it, own up to it, and say, I made a mistake. I don't want to repeat the mistake anymore because it's only brought me agony and problems. I don't want this anymore. And just go away from it, forsake it, leave it. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I don't care if it's your rabbi or your mother or, your cat. Do what you need to do tshuva. But do it with emes, with truthfulness. That's the first point. The next thing he says is v'yashar. What's v'yashar mean? V'yashar mean the proper way, the right way, the straight way. The Gemara says, Yoini, listen to this, Moshe, listen to this, a fascinating piece of Talmud. There was a rabbi named Elazar ben Durdaya. Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya. And this Elazar ben Durdaya was worse than Wilt Chamberlain. You guys heard of Wilt Chamberlain, didn't you? Right? Wilt Chamberlain wrote in an article, and I read it, so I don't have it. I wish I would have kept it because it's good for evidence. But Wilt Chamberlain wrote that he had relations with over 1,000 women. That's what he wrote, okay? I'm sure you can Google it or find it. Now, for Wilt Chamberlain, he's not Jewish. It's not a transgression. How do you like that? But for us Jews, to have relationships outside of marriage, if you're married, and even if you're not married, but if you're married, it's not appropriate. It's a violation. It's a transgression. This rabbi, Elazar ben Durdaya, was even worse than Wilt Chamberlain. I'm sorry, he wasn't a rabbi, take that back. This person, Elazar ben Durdaya. The Gemara says there wasn't an indulgence in his life that he didn't have, from women to food to all kinds of addictions. Whatever he wanted, he got. I guess he was a wealthy man, and he was able to afford his pleasures, his heathenistic lifestyle. The Gemara says he came once and he realized, and the Talmud gives, he looks at the heavens, and he looks at the mountains, and he looks at the trees, and each of this is a symbol of something in his life. He used to blame his parents. He used for his stuff. He used to blame his rabbis. He used to blame the community that he grew up in, right? He had all kinds of reasons why he's a pariah, and why he's a transgressor, and why he's such an indulgent, heathenistic person, okay? And then he looks up to the heaven and he says, I realize now it's not about you. And he looks to the trees and he says, I realize it's not about you. And he goes through all the things in nature, and then he says, it's about me. It's about me. And then he does Teshuva. And the Teshuva that he does is that he cries out, it's about me, and he dies on the spot. He did such a powerful Teshuva that it impacted him to the point where his soul left him. And the Talmud says he died with Teshuva. The Talmud, or actually it's Rebbe, right? Isser, I forget, I think it's Rebbe that says over there, Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya died with true Teshuva. Now, that experience is out of the ordinary. That's not yashar. That's not the proper path. That's not what we want a person to work towards. If that happens, it happens. But to say that's what's expected, no. So the Alter Rebbe is saying over here, as he begins treatise on what to do tshuva, he tells us, don't depend on these type of experiences to happen, and that's the way you'll do tshuva. In other words, he'll say like this: I'll indulge, I'll be heathenistic, I'll sin, I'll do whatever I want, and then one day God will have mercy on me and he'll give me a kick in my pants, and somehow I'll do tshuva. That's not yashar. If that happens, that happens. Okay? The story I always told, I don't think Moshe heard this from me. He wasn't in the classes though when I told this story a few years ago. When I was in the Yeshiva in Los Angeles in 1981 to 81, 82 to 83, I remember a fellow walking in one night, Thursday night, like 2, 3 in the morning. We were up learning farbrengens, and he tells us, we asked him, where you coming from? He didn't look observant at all, far from it. He says, I've been driving from Las Vegas at 80, 90 miles an hour on the freeway, and I just came into LA, and I happened to see a synagogue, and I stopped in, and the rabbi there told me that I should check into a yeshiva, and he came to us. We were nearby. And why? He says, I was running away from someone who wanted to kill me because he accused me of stealing his girlfriend. And the rest, you can imagine what this guy went through and what he was up to and all that. And therefore, he decided to go into a synagogue. Now that's, and from there, he had a Jewish experience. He shaped up. I don't know how long it lasted, but that's like, a wake-up call from heaven that comes through a fear that he ends up in the yeshiva, right? But that's not yashar. When the Alter Rebbe says here, derech ha'emes v'hayashar, the true path and the proper path and the straight path, that's not straight. That's like this. It's not like this. Says the Alter Rebbe, I'm going to give you a prescription. We have our resident doctor here, a prescription that is the norm. Like Issa just told you before, you miss your normal dose of antibiotics, you take the next day twice as much. That's yashar. That's what medicine says, right? That's yashar. You want to do it another way? You know, you're on your own, my friend. So yashar is the proper path. Now let's see what this proper path is. So he says the proper path to reconnect the severed hey from the three letters Yud Kei Vav, the hey tato, ho aleph. He says there's two things. Ho aleph, the first thing is, we're on page 192. Third line into chapter 7. Ho aleph hu la'oirer rachamim hu al yoinim. It is to arouse supernal mercy, mimokar arachamim, from the source of mercy, al nishmosai, on your soul, v'nafshe likis, on your godly soul, shnof lo mi'igra rama, which fell from a very high cliff, a very high mountain. Chaya chayim baruch hu, that's the life of the living God. And where did it fall? Lebira mikta, to a very deep and low valley. Hey necholish, this refers to the chambers of tuma, of spiritual contamination, the sitra achra, and negativity. Spirit